If modern disease is killing our gut, why do we see different levels of disease around the world? So if we look around the world, obviously there's quite a big difference between the modern developed industrial societies, predominantly in the West, and the more traditional, slower paced societies in places like Africa and the Far East. And generally, if we look at the overall main differences, it's you've got the fast-paced Western lifestyles, which generally are quite stressed. There's a lot of technology. There's a lot of stuff to think about in terms of constant bills, pressure, jobs, all these other things. Whereas in the more traditional societies, there's maybe less of that, a bit more of a community cohesion spirit amongst the residents and populations. And there's also a bit more of a living in tune with nature kind of approach to it all. So even things like farming in rural communities are often still done by hand or by animals rather than heavy machinery like would be done in the West. But interestingly, aside from those main differences, there's also quite vast differences in disease rates and health outcomes. We know that the modern societies, particularly in the West, have huge healthcare, some of the most advanced healthcare in the world, the machines and specialists that you can think of. If you had any sort of disease, you can be pretty sure that there will be doctors in these kind of developed nations that will be able to deal with those problems. On the flip side, in the more traditional rural places, there's not necessarily that same level of healthcare. There's not necessarily that same level of technology. And that often means that obviously you don't have the same level of specialists. So you would expect there to be almost higher disease in the less developed places than you do in the developed places. But that's not necessarily the case. And if we look at particularly lifestyle diseases, these are massively overrepresented in the West and fairly underrepresented in the more undeveloped societies. And this is backed up by evidence as well. So in the European Crohn's and Colitis Organization, as well as the World Gastroenterology Organization, they have numerous papers showing that when people move from less developed societies into the more industrial ones, their risk factor for these kind of lifestyle diseases like IBD increases. After 2 generations, so once someone has moved, they've had a kid and then they've had a kid, that person has the same risk profile as that of the native population. So the assumption here, and there is evidence to support this obviously, is that food plays a big part in this development of disease or this risk of developing disease. But that's not the whole story. And lifestyle also plays a big factor. And if we look at the places on Earth where the people live the longest, it's hard not to mention the blue zones. Now, the blue zones are specific areas around the world. One of them is in Japan, Okinawa. One of them is in Sardinia. And there's a few others dotted around the world. And they tend to have the longest living people. Now, they do share some food similarities in terms of having a very sort of traditional diet, which tends to be more whole foods, almost no packaged foods and ultra-processed foods. But aside from the food stuff, there's other things that they're doing very similar as well. So they all tend to be quite active. A lot of them do quite a lot of walking. There's quite a community spirit, often tied with religion as well. But there is definitely a cohesion in these societies compared to other developed societies where that's been lost over the years just because people become busy. People move in and out of towns pretty fast for jobs and whatever else. So that same level of community cohesion probably doesn't exist in the same way that it does in these traditional places. One common theme they also share is that they just take life at a bit of a slower pace. So because of that, it means that there's no rush to prep food, which is probably why they don't have a problem with processed foods and stuff like that. There is an emphasis on cooking. There is an emphasis on dinner time and spending time with family and not rushing through these occasions. Whereas in the West, food is often an afterthought because we need to think about getting to the next call, getting to the next appointment. And in the West, we're often rushing through these parts of life. We rush through meal times, we rush cooking. Everything is just fast-paced and stressed because of it. So what does this tell us? Basically, this tells us that alongside managing your food for IBD, your lifestyle is so important. Taking the time to slow things down, taking the time to appreciate things, and taking time for yourself is part of the hidden battle that not many people talk about. We always talk about diet, and diet obviously is very important, but diet alone isn't going to be enough to cure you long term if you don't have the mindset and the lifestyle around it as well. So lifestyle, the pace of your own life and the enjoyment factor all play a massive part in how healthy your gut's going to be. See you on the next one.